So the first thing that I want to make sure that you know is that every discipline can use project-based learning, every single one. I want to use today, our time together, to make sure that you understand that it doesn't have to be super, super complex. It doesn't have to be complicated. What I really want to do with everyone is make sure that your particular content area is being addressed. And so I will give you access to these slides, and there is a particular slide. It has nested cards in it. And what the nested cards do is essentially you can click them and they'll drop down for you, and they'll explain with an example how you might see project-based learning in your content area or in your discipline. So the main questions that I want to get out of the way, and if you've never seen one of my presentations, I really love using Gamma, and this is gamma.app, and it's spelled just like it sounds, GAMMA .app. It is extremely useful. It is an AI. You can use, I should say, you can use AI with it, but it's not just an AI platform. For example, I just use the template from here, but the idea is that it allows me to share the online presentation fairly quickly. So if you like to try it, it's Gamma, GAMMA .app. The Padlet, I tried my best to send this out to everybody. However, I know that I had a couple of people that they added a little bit later, and you may not have gotten the Padlet access. So if you did not receive Padlet access, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to show you on the next slide. Oops, sorry, Gamma, going a little too fast. I should have a QR code for you. Those of you who received the link, you're more than welcome to use the link. And this is just a way for me to contact you again. It's just a very easy to use option. If you've never used Padlet, please let me know in the chat. And I know I have a moderator. Thank you. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to make sure everybody has the option, but I know that the captions are making it difficult. Okay. There we go. I'm just going to leave this here for a second. If for whatever reason you still don't have access, it's okay. I promise I will send out this presentation, and the presentation will give you access. So for whatever reason, just send your question or comment into the chat now, and then that way we can still get to it. Okay. But the Padlet, again, if you've never used Padlet, it is a very easy and useful app. I believe that the Padlet has a little bit more an extensive word use. And so when we're doing things like trying to retain the feedback or trying to improve the lesson or the project or what have you, Padlet is very, very useful to chop up into bits. Whereas Menti, I do use Menti a lot. I love Menti, but Menti is more meant for me personally in the short term, very quick, very fast. Padlet is meant for more of the long term, and this particular presentation is more extensive. So that's why I used Padlet. I always like to explain why I choose what I choose, because I think it will be helpful for you. Okay, so I wonder if I can move the captions. I can. Smooth. Okay, yeah. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, mostly because I would love to show you in action my Google Drive. I even brought up one of my D2L courses where I personally thought the project-based learning was beautiful. And I wanted you to see an online course, because I know that in theory, people think project-based learning, awesome in class, on campus, face-to-face. I actually believe that online learning is just as, if not more, compatible with project-based learning than than on campus. So the first thing that I want you to know is that what I start with is the end. And if you've ever heard of backwards thinking or backwards learning, backwards planning, that's what that means. Is what do I want the students to know? What do I want them to be able to do by the end of the project? Now, let me just be very clear, not every unit, not every SLO or student learning objective is going to need to be project-based. It's just not. There are some things that need to stay as an independent process, okay? So that being said, when you should use project-based learning, usually when it's a relevant real world application or it has the potential to engage students in such a way that we think of on a society level. What we're really trying to do is find ways for students not to be able to get out of critical thinking. They have to critically think. Project-based learning is amazing for this. And I want to make sure I didn't skip a slide because I feel like I may have. Let me make sure. I did skip a slide. Okay. And I worked really hard on these images, y'all. I don't know if anyone uses Dolly, DALL-E, but it's basically an AI image generator app. And if those of you who are not familiar with me don't know, my name is Kayla Almaguer, and I am the AI faculty fellow for Lone Star College Tomball. And I also have been helping public school districts and private school districts integrate AI-informed curricula. So when I tell you about how Gamma is a generative AI, it generates presentations. When I tell you that Dolly is an image generative AI, it generates images. And so these images are all AI generated. But a couple of the reasons that I really wanted to use the images is to just show everyone how much more involved you can be with your students by asking them to create components of a presentation. So rather than merely asking them to create 3 bullets or maybe a slideshow in general, I'm going to give you a couple of different options that I personally loved to see online students in particular, not to say that I don't use them on campus because I do, but online students try to do because it's hilarious. And sometimes the humor that they get from the project is part of the learning and the part of the engagement. So increases student engagement. That's the first one, of course. And I had a wonderful question. I think it was from Ms. Hall, not positive, about project management classes. And it just so happened, I already had this image here, I promise, but this is a project management type of image where you have tangible, movable parts, right? And so I'll talk more about that in a little while. Critical thinking and problem solving. What happens over the course of project-based units, I can't even, there's no real way for me to determine what may happen because it's a beautiful process of chaos. They may learn that they need time management skills because they don't finish on time. They may learn that they are really good with the very small tasks, but horrible on the broader perspective. And what this really accumulates into is self-awareness. The student starts building self-awareness, which is, I'm not sure if anyone here goes to therapy. I am in therapy and I'm also studying to become a therapist. It is a key component to unleashing the blocked potential that is currently probably held back by your childhood trauma, any kind of mental or cognitive distortions you might have. Self-awareness is the key to those things, and it goes hand in hand with learning, with critically thinking and problem solving. So what happens as they work as a group, as a team, is that they get peer reviewed, and the peer reviews are very honest. And usually I try to stay away from the partners in the beginning of courses, and I lean towards the 3 or 4 teams so that I can mix up and make the feedback anonymous when they get peer reviewed so that they're not so self-conscious. And I'm going to pause right after this, y'all, because this is a lot of information and I do want to show you what this might look like, but I also don't want everybody to lose the questions before they even get to them. But please make sure the Padlet is being, utilized. I will go back to the Padlet in just a minute to make sure that I'm answering any questions that you might have used the Padlet for and not our presentation. If you're thinking, well, why would I use this chat over the Padlet? It's just the time, y'all. It's very quick. If you're thinking, why would I use the Padlet over this presentation? The Padlet is going to be a lot more, like I said, extensive, and it's going to allow me to return to it after we leave together today, and I can reach out to you. Okay. So the collaboration and communication, if I asked you what the number one thing was that negatively impacted students during the pandemic, I think a lot of instructors, a lot of people, I should say, would admit that it's social skills. It's the ability to talk to people or to even approach someone and have confidence. And so what you're doing when you are asking for a project-based unit is really giving them the opportunity. And it's kind of a forced, right? It's kind of a forced opportunity, but there's ways around it. And a lot of it has to deal with choice and giving options. So who would not want to promote that kind of structure and concept, especially after we have all gone through the isolation of the pandemic? So this one over here, I want to make sure everybody can see, but I don't want to, again, I worked really hard on these images, y'all. It took me a while. So I want everyone to see it. Fosters academic integrity and personal accountability. So in an age where generative AI, for example, chatbots, large language models, they're one and the same, are running rampant. Academic integrity and personal accountability really comes from the process-based projects rather than the result or the product. Okay, so particularly in online courses, I have a few things that have helped to encourage academic honesty, but nothing has encouraged it as well as the project-based learning. It has been an incredibly sound way for me to identify the students who are potentially misusing AI and to identify the students who are going to be very honest with their partner about, hey, I'm not comfortable using this in our project because it seems like you used a chatbot. And they will tell each other that. So again, we're fostering this community through the collaboration and communication component. Sorry, y'all, trying to get to the next one. Okay, so we talked about the authentic objectives. We're now going to talk about, and I have something in the chat, y'all, so I want to make sure. But let me go see, hold on, possibly. I didn't say they were perfect, y'all. One moment. Oh, this one? Is it this one? Hold on. I said I worked really hard on them. I didn't say they were perfect. This guy? Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Dang it. Okay. As we can see, AI is not perfect. I'm going to keep it moving. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Margaret. I see you. I see you. Okay. This one you can't really see. So let me move this. One moment. I think a lot of us, some of these are scary looking. Don't look at her face in particular. This one, let me just cover that one. It took me a long time to make these, okay? Just leave me alone. Margaret specifically. I think a lot of times what I hear faculty say is, well, they should know. The student should know. Okay, let me just be completely honest with you. They should know. I agree. However, when you go into a relationship, right, and your relationship is fairly new, and this is hopefully going to help reinforce why we should be explicit with what academic integrity looks like in our classes. Because for me, it looks very different than for some other instructor in some other part of our campus. When you enter into a relationship and it's a romantic relationship and your partner does something that continues to irritate you, and eventually you can't take it anymore and you just come out, guns ablazing, you're blowing up. And your partner turns to you and says, well, I just didn't know. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. And you said, well, I told you that's what it was. And they said, well, yeah, you told me, but I didn't realize that this thing that I was doing translated into this thing for you, right? Y'all, it's the exact same thing that's happening with the students. They could be, I'm not saying they couldn't be. They could be blatantly cheating, but it's very few percentage that I believe really come just to cheat their way through. I think the larger majority don't realize. They just don't realize that this actually is this, right? But because it's never been clarified, because it's never been directly stated, they just don't know. And so, of course, you're going to be hard pressed to find a student that outrightly says, yes, I did this on purpose. Most of the time, they're going to say, well, I knew that this was the policy, the written policy. I just didn't realize that this didn't, mean that. And so hopefully that clarifies some things. Yeah, this one's scary. I'm going to take this one down. One moment. This one was the hardest one, though. I just imagined a discussion in which everything is explicitly stated. And that means giving them visuals, giving them situations. I try my best to give a frequently asked question. I guess it's not quite part of my survey, but it is part of my email that I send out. I send out an email every semester about a week before it starts, and just explaining certain things and providing in my website a couple of different options for them to look at what it looks like to be academically dishonest. Because we're walking around saying, well, they should know, they should know. Yo, they should know, they could know, but it doesn't mean that they understand it the way that you want them to. So why not clarify? What are we going to lose by clarifying what that looks like? And this is particularly useful for online courses because the online students are hard to reach. So after we talk about objectives, again, backwards planning where we want them to be, and considering whether or not this is a unit that should be project-based, because not all should be. They could be, but I have personally struggled with, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Why can't I get it to be more fun or be more engaging? Y'all, it's because it just wasn't a process that should be project-based. However, what I love is a good theme. I love a good theme. And so when we are talking about disciplines like the humanities, themes are so much easier, I understand. But I want to encourage you to think about themes in the sciences and in the maths as more of unit-based themes. And so this might look a little different, but it's essentially the same concept in that it has overlapping patterns. And I'm thinking like polynomials, right? That might be the theme and that was for math. So in the sciences, it might be, and this is because we all learn this, right? The parts of a cell, right? The mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Whew. All right. This is a theme. It could be a theme, right? So it doesn't have to be something that's fancy. It could just be something that is interwoven into each piece. And so this makes it more difficult for students to use AI tools, right? It makes it much harder. When you are making a test that has multiple choice, one answer, I want to ask the question, not because I don't care, but because I do care. Is it the student or is it the way the student is being assessed that is the issue? And I think we all need to sit with that. Does there need to be change on my part for the way that I am assessing? Or does there need to be change on the student's part? And I just want to be very honest. The second option is never going to happen because you can't change the student. You can't change the other external factor. What you can do is revert back to, what can I change to discourage or make it a lot harder for the student not to be able to be academically dishonest? And I think one of the biggest things is make the assessments a lot more creative. Make them a lot harder for some student to feed it into a chatbot, a Google, web browser. A lot of this I'm going to move into from here has to do with project-based learning. So let me make sure I don't click too fast. When you are thinking about, okay, I want to do a project-based unit, but I feel like it's going to be overwhelming. Let me just tell you, this is where the chatbot comes in. And so anybody who is using ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Perplexity, I usually use for students. I don't use personally to build stuff, but you could. Claude is also very popular. Any of those chatbots can do this in the blink of an eye. They can turn your unit into a project-based unit online or on campus within minutes, if not seconds. Now, is it going to be perfect? Is the plan going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If it was, well, then there would be no critical thinking. Fortunately for us, in generative AI, it's all critical thinking, because what you are trying to do is still communicate with this machine learning component, right? And that's hard. That's difficult. What we want to do is make sure that we accept this is still going to be a difficult process. It's just going to be a different kind of difficult. So for example, when I build new project-based units, a lot of times I have to go in knowing that my plan isn't going to go as planned. And the last bullet here about checkpoints, usually what I have them do is it's not just feedback for each other that they're giving, like, hey, where are you? Or where are you? Or how are you struggling and how can I help? It's also for me, where I'm coming and I'm sitting with them and conferencing, or I'm putting up a discussion post for my online students and telling them, hey, what is working in this part of the project and what is not? And a lot of times, for example, I find out that it's maybe technical issues. So maybe the platform that I originally wanted them to use is just not working. I used to really like using Jamboard, and then Jamboard went away and it just like completely disappeared. And so all of my projects that had a Jamboard in them had to be changed. So again, I think that we really want to think about it needs to be flexible and it needs to accommodate for different unforeseen circumstances. So just be compassionate with yourself when you're building it. Use what you have at your fingertips. Chatbots are not an enemy. Chatbots are an ally, especially when it comes to educators and administration. It's incredible. And that's a totally different presentation. So I have 20 minutes and I really want to make sure I have questions or time for questions. So incorporate a variety of assessment methods is the next step. I do all of these, y'all. I'm more than happy to show you what some of these will look like for me. But I do group assessments. They're very quick. Usually my group assessments and my peer reviews are in the form of Google Forms. And the Google Forms essentially allow me to facilitate the assessment without having to have the uncomfortable discussion between the group and the one person who wasn't doing anything. The self-assessments, however, the self-assessments are usually questionnaires that are in an assignment folder. And those are just as important because I need the student to reflect on how their time management was. And remember, these are real world skills. So if the project is focused really on content, that's absolutely fine. You just make that another subheading. But I highly encourage you to include something along the lines of real world skills so that the student is fully aware, wow, this was really useful. Like I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my learning process. And so whether it's anatomy and physiology, and that was the project, or if it was on a completely different scale, right? Kinesiology, and it was about, they're working out and thinking about him and his session. It doesn't matter because the student is still gaining very, very useful knowledge. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to show the students why it's going to end with success if they continue on in school. That's the idea. Hopefully that's the goal. Then the requirement of personal reflection, I want to be very, very clear. When we say personal reflection, you're not just telling the student, reflect on how this experience went for you. If you do, you will almost definitely get chatbot generated answers, or you will just straight out get the most basic of sentences. I learned a good amount of stuff. That's not what we mean, y'all. when we are talking about personal reflections, we're talking about very specific, usually at categories. So like if you wanted to do it chronologically, you could do at the start of the project and then 3 questions. And the first question might be what you anticipated you were going to struggle with. And then you have the next section in the middle, the area of the process you actually struggled with, right? Then you, at the end, in the future, what is one area that you would like to continue to work on? And so what I'm trying to emphasize is the students need more detail on the side of the instruction. Just asking someone, hey, can you tell me what you learned today? I want you to imagine when you ask your child that, my daughter would not answer that question. And I understand why, because there's really not a lot she can go off of. And I don't think we appreciate being asked that question either, when someone just says like, how can I be better? Or how can I do this better? Y'all, it's a blank, right? It's a blank. However, when you start chunking them into very specific questions, like a performance review, right? It becomes a lot more natural. Now, there are questions like with the application of knowledge of like the KWS, something I want to know or something I learned, something along like the line of acronym like that. Presentation skills. Again, the idea is to build the academic integrity of the project. And so if one of the students or all of the students did end up cheating, well, it's going to become very well known very quickly. And whatever you do with that is, that's your policy, that's your practice, but you'll know that's the idea, is that it will be reflected in their reflection or in their peer reviews or in there's so many different, right? There's so many different methods. There is very, very low chance that one of them will not indicate the truth. And I'm gonna move to how we make the students work together. Okay, the first thing that I make very clear is you are being graded by your peer. And it is the exact same weighted grade that you will receive from my personal assessment and from your self-assessment. So there's 3 different assessments right there. It's here's what I see from the things that you said you were going to do. Here's what your partner sees from the things that you said you were going to do. And so again, we're building that sense of accountability, that personal accountability. And then here's what your presentation or whatever the product might be, right? It's not always presentations, y'all. Here's what it says about what you claim to have done and then what was actually there. So that's 3 different ones. They're self-assessments. Usually they're very honest with them about, I said I did this, I could have done it better. It's very rare at this point of the project that students are just kind of like, completely full of themselves. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does, but not very much. The tools and the platforms that track, y'all, this is going to vary from discipline to discipline. For example, going back to Tim Musel's kinesiology, he has an app that his students use to track. That's a kinesiology class, right? For me, I'm a humanities, I'm an English communication, very heavy on the interpersonal skills. I'm not going to use that app. For the most part, what I'm going to use is journal reflections. So I have students journal in class, online, and usually it's just an anonymous post to the discussion thread, and they have to have some kind of audio, a visual. There is always an extra component. It's never, in the post-AI world, it is never just written. And I would highly, highly suggest, if you are not requiring audio and or visual in your classes, you very quickly start, because it will increase the accountability 100 times over again. It is absolutely worth it, y'all. Margaret, if you see anything in here in this picture, I generated this one like 20 times. I do pay to use Dolly, y'all. I pay $20 a month. I no longer have Netflix because I wanted this more. So I'm about to close. I'm gonna ask that if anyone sees anything, you let me know. Let me see. Oh my gosh, thank you. I appreciate that. Look at that, validated. So I'm not going to go through all of these cards. This is what I call a nested, I'm sorry. This is what Gamma LoneStar.app calls a nested card. I love nested cards. Should I convert this unit to project-based learning? What I essentially did with my bot is I went through and had a conversation about what kinds of questions do I ask myself when I'm trying to consider whether or not I should be turning this into a project-based learning opportunity. These are the questions. And if you just click these, because you're going to have access to this in just a second, they will open up just like this, and it will answer your question. And of course, if you have more questions, I will check that Padlet. If you have ever worked with me or been to one of my presentations, I follow up, y'all. I'm very much about action. So please let me know what you need, explicitly, of course. This is the other one that I was telling you about in the beginning, the what could project-based learning look like in my discipline. Me and my bot tried, because I use ChatGPT now exclusively pretty much, to cover all of the different disciplines. By no means is this an exhaustive list though. So what's here is the STEM fields, the humanities fields, the social sciences, business management, health sciences, and then education, of course, because I'm an educator first. So I had to put that separate. I know that they're not all here, y'all. I'm very sorry. I really did try to cover as many bases as I possibly could, but now I have 12 minutes. I would like to give everybody the opportunity to access this online presentation, and I'm gonna move it over from the presentation to my own class on D2L so that I can show you what I'm talking about when we talk about format, because I really want to make sure that my my lovely person who asked the question about how would I do this in a project management class, they have a visual, because sometimes when we hear it, it sounds great, but when we see it, it makes a lot more sense. So I'm just going to leave this up for a minute or two more. Actually, sorry, 10 to 15 seconds. I don't want to lie to you. Okay, time's up. If you would like to scan for more, what this will do, y'all, I have a website that everybody, I promise, everybody will get access to it. But if you'd like to scan this one, it will also send you to my website. I'm trying to stop at the 10-minute mark so that I have enough time to show you, again, a little version that I really love to do with my online students of a project-based unit. But this has essentially all of the tools, all of the resources, everything that I feel could be useful to educators. You have access to it. It is all free. It's always free. I love free. I say if it's free, it's for me. And so can you buy additional credits? Absolutely. Gamma.app, you can buy additional credits. Padlet, apparently now everything has an additional thing, but you don't have to. Everything there you could get for free if you just wanted to click the links that are in the website. Okay, so here is my first. Oh my goodness, apologies, I've been very popular. That's popularity for me, y'all. 3 text messages, that's a lot of popularity for me. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna check the Padlet really quickly. Sorry, y'all. I can't tell if it's not moving or if I'm not moving. There we go. Okay. If you are curious as to how to use the Padlet, because again, I would love feedback. I would love any comments, questions, anything like that. You can see that if you had a question about a particular slide, you can ask it here. You just press this little plus sign button and it should pop up with a, oh my gosh. There we go. It should pop up with this little honeycomb. And then you can write out, you can attach things, anything like that. I really want to get better about having a longer, more extensive option for my participants. So this is the goal for why we use the Padlet now, or why we're using the Padlet for this particular presentation. Here is a project-based learning. And this one is an argumentative unit. The idea in my online courses, let me just be clear, is to teach them whether they want to be taught or not, for them to learn whether they want to learn or not. And so this is what I call an ignite, and an ignite presentation. This is just one, y'all. There are multiple forms of production when it comes to, they could be doing an image only with audio presentation. They could be on the flip side, audio only, and then have the written version, but not using it, right? And so this, again, it takes a lot of audio and it takes a lot of visual, but in an online course, it's very difficult to not do that with integrity. Even in the event, and this is what I like to stress to educators, even in the event the student did use a chatbot model to read off of, they're still retaining that information. They're still not going to read it very well because they have no idea, right, what the words mean. It's still going to become clear to you that the student probably didn't learn very much. So let me just go ahead and talk about the first step. And I always do step one, is the assignment sheet, of course, and then the student example of what it looks like. And so I'm going to open this so that I can show you. I always give them a model of a real student, not a model that I produced, because it needs to not look perfect. The students will try their best to duplicate, and usually it's not going to work very well. So this is it's uploaded into my Google Drive. Let me just logistically be clear. D2L is horrific with having large files uploaded to it. So as a compromise, and I'll talk to Larry about this because Larry's our online person, I upload the bigger videos into a Google folder, or I share a Google folder with students for them to have editing access, and each of them have their own folder. So if you're worried about, well, how does the student have access to the other student? How do I keep track of that? Google Drive is your best friend. If you wanted to, you could absolutely use something like Dropbox. You could use, I don't even know how to use Dropbox, y'all. I don't really ever use it. So I'm sure you could though. There are different ways that students can, the lockers in D2L, I have used lockers once. It wasn't my favorite experience, but whatever works for you, just don't make it hard. Don't make it hard on yourself. So here's the student model. And then, of course, they have the assignment sheet. I'll usually give them a video in the announcement. Here is the step 2, and this is the template, y'all. The template is usually extremely important because if we have, and this goes back to the relationship where they didn't know that they were doing it, but if we have this idea in our mind of what we want the product to look like, well, then we need to be accountable for providing the structure and the insight for the student to know what that image is. Because why would we make them guess? Why would we make them play that very exhausting cognitive game? Especially when they're practically brand new or very new, I should say. And it's almost my 5-minute mark to the structure of higher education. So in this template, you can see that I have pre-formatted. I don't know if it's clear for those of you on smaller screens, but I have already timed them. There is a timer on the bottom. The idea of an Ignite is that it is an images only, and you have 15 seconds per slide. Online students will attach audio in the background, and the slide has to match what they're speaking about. And so because they've done all this research prior, they've done a proposal, they've done an annotated bibliography, they have worked with a peer to play the opposition. This is the cumulative, right? Because the project base, we go through a lot of phases, but within those phases, I've built in, again, because I was working backwards when I was planning, I built in the assurance that the FLOs are still being considered as I'm going through. And so each step will require the student to apply one or more of those objectives. And so that's very important that it's intentional because this doesn't happen on accident. Where I got the template from, y'all, years ago, I got it from Google probably. It gives them the number of templates, and this is just one template of many templates, y'all. I'm sure I could find more if I wanted to. I give them a script template and then the actual submission. If you wanted to see more, I would be happy to show you in my Google Drive. I have a ton more. I don't know if it's going to let me get out of this though. Apparently not. But if you have questions, I would love questions right now while I'm just, doodling around and showing you all of my projects. I know that some questions are going to be very individual type questions where maybe it's your discipline or maybe it's the time frame that you have in class. Oh, this is a job packet. I really loved that one. That was for my business and technical writing class. The e-portfolio is really fun. Let me see. I have something in the chat and I have 3 minutes left. Oh, okay. Grimelda said that you can post in the Q&A area of the Zoom. And I'm going to continue to look really quickly. Course materials. And then I'll show you online. This is just for, I think, this unit right now. The video essay unit's really fun. The peer-to-peer unit. And you know what? I just started the peer-to-peer unit with them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the plan. Just so that you have, again, another visual. And I still have 2.5 minutes left. So I want to use them wisely. So this is the first step in their peer-to-peer. And peer-to-peer means that they go ahead, they start with choosing a topic, and I provide the topics very, very simply. My bot helps me to put it in more student-friendly language. And their assignment, the first step in the assignment is to choose which one they are going to take. And then they go to D2L and they post, this is the thesis that I want to use, and it's a support or an against. And then they go to, these are the modalities, because this is one of the final units. These are the modalities. And again, we have done all of these modalities already. So they should be very well versed, or at the very least practiced. And so they choose 2. This is, again, this is hard. They're translating from one to another. That's a lot of critical thinking, y'all. And then they post so that they are going to be partnered with the person who is going to play the opposite for whatever their selection was. Thank you, Dr. Rose. Audio and visual. I can't stress it enough, y'all. Doesn't matter what discipline. I love it for math. I love it for sciences. I have yet to find a discipline that will not benefit from audio and visual, because it's just incredibly helpful, and it does engage the student more than if you just said, like, write it, post it, right? And there are a lot of other different ideas, y'all. I could go on and on about this because I love project-based learning, but I don't want to go over my time. It's 1 minute left. I just wanted to show y'all how I personally structure things. And stop share. Sorry, forgot how to do that for a second. Okay,